All right, well, our new project is going to be centered around cycle animation using a character rig. I thought that this would be a quick and easy way to get exposed to a much more complicated rig than our previous projects, but doing it in a way where maybe it's not quite so overwhelming and being able to focus on tighter bits of kind of ideas and tighter um, amounts of controls. So here we have just a walk cycle set up that is done in a way that I've described in class, which is we're basically making 12 key poses to create a walk cycle. Oftentimes when people jump into Maya, they very much rely on what Maya does for you, which is all of the in-between frames. So if you have a cube and the cube starts over here on this frame and over here it ends up on this frame, what Maya can do super easily is just put the transitions in there for you. But what that does is it takes out of your hands a lot of the details and the important easing that creates kind of lifelike motion and something in animation that's very important, which is arcs. And by hand keying these to begin with, we can kind of get a feeling for getting that set up to begin with. All right, well, to get going, I'll go ahead and run through how I got to this point, starting from scratch. So to start with, I would just make a new scene. And right when I opened Maya, I would have set my project to whatever my project folder is. Here, you can see that I have one called Kirby Cycle Project, and inside of here, I have all the appropriate folders. So if I set it, then I go to File, Open Scene, or sorry, then I go to File, Create Reference. I will be able to reference in this the rig that we have for class, which is called Pat. And by referencing in Pat, I'm going to be able to start animating on him, and also if there's any fixes in the future that I need to make. If I have a new version of Pat, I can just reference that in and it'll save all my animation, but it will also bring in all of the edits. So to get going, I usually turn everything off just so that I only want to see exactly what I need, which is NURBS curves, surfaces, and polygons. I don't need to see anything else, so I don't turn anything else on. I just like to have a lot of control over visibility. And also for selecting, the thing that I do is I actually turn off polygon selection, which is up here. So I can't accidentally click on any of the geometry. It makes it much easier to select the controls and never accidentally click on the person. Okay, the other option that I often work with is down here, which is auto key. And the reason that I do that is so that if I have put in, or if I'm starting my animation, for example, by putting in some animation on the Y channel, if I right click and do a key selected, then for future frames, I don't have to go back and do that step again. If I just move, it just goes ahead and locks that in. So I don't have to kind of constantly be going over here and doing right clicking, key selected. Even though that's pretty fast, it's just kind of a time saver if you get that going. The other option that I need to get set up is specifically for this project, I want to work with stepped tangents, and you can tell Maya to automatically create stepped tangents by setting it up in your animation preferences. So down here, where you have the little sprocket and running guy, if you click that, it'll bring up your preferences, and then you can click on animation, and here where it says tangents, by default, this should be what you see. If you select the in tangent, switch that over to linear, and you switch the out one to stepped, and you save. Now, if you were to put in a keyframe here, and then you have another keyframe down here, it doesn't transition between, it pops. And this is how we're going to do this project, because we're basically going to have 7 or 12 poses that it's just popping between, but because it's happening every 2 frames, it'll look like a 12 frame a second animation. Okay, and then the last thing is to get my timeline set up to be the right number of frames. I want to do a 24 frame walk cycle, and because I'm starting on frame 1, I'll go ahead and set this to frame 25. And this is actually 24 frames. So your first frame here and your frame here is your first and last one, and then 13 is halfway, and then you can go halfway between there, which is 7, and halfway between the end and here is 19. All right. So to get going, what I'm going to do is start to put in the up and down motion for the kind of the start and the end pose. And in the project folder, I've got this walk cycle info. And so here you can see a couple of the key terms that I'll be mentioning several times throughout the lesson. So what I'm going to do is actually be animating from this pose, the down pose, to an up pose, and then back to a down pose. So this will be frame 1, then this will be frame 7, and then there'll be another one at frame 13, and then 19 and 25. So I'm going to go down, up, down, and that would be my total cycle. Okay, so here, the way that I'll get going to figure out just how far forward and how far back or how far down things go, I just, kind of take a stab. It's a little bit of kind of guesswork at this phase because I don't have a lot to go from yet. So I'll move down maybe this much and move my foot forward to start to get the first pose. And you can see with the down pose, you usually have a nice flat foot, and then the foot behind is pretty much right on its toe, and you have a good knee bend. So what I'll do is I'll get my root control, which is this one in the middle, and position my leg with a good knee bend, but still so that my foot is flat. I'll also move my foot in a little bit, and hitting rotate, I'll rotate in the Y direction so that it's just a little bit out, because I don't want my foot pointing totally straight forward. It's kind of a little unnatural. Okay, so one quick tip for this rig, you can copy and paste a lot of information between FK controls, which is usually just has rotation values. Like rotation values copy and paste very well. So if you've spent a bunch of time working through positioning one hand, you can actually save that and duplicate it over to the other one pretty easily. Using this quick select control, which you can turn on here on your main control. Under quick select, you turn it on or you can turn it off. So with it turned on, if you click that, then it will highlight all the finger controls. And so if I go ahead and hit S, which I know in the past I've kind of frowned on, but for this, because things are locked off, I'm only going to be keying the rotation values, which is fine. So with this keyframe here, what I can actually do is right click on the timeline and say copy. And then with the quick select control, I'll select the other hand, and then I can right click on the timeline and paste. And because the rig is set up in a certain way, all the all the rotation values come in correctly, so you can copy from one hand to the other. And at this point, I feel like this is a good first key pose. So what I'll do is highlight all the controls, and that will activate every single control on the rig. And I'll go ahead and hit S. And because this pose is going to be the same pose here at the end, I'll go ahead and select frame 25 and also hit S. Cool. So now we have our first and last pose. And what you can do is actually kind of use this exact same pose and just flip a few values and you'll get a mirror pose of this, and then you'll have your halfway point. So if I hit S, which as a starting point, what I'll want to do after that is come in and just find basically the controls on this side and copy them to this side, and then from this side and copy them over to this side. For example, if I select my right arm, I can come back to here on frame 1, copy those, then I can select my left arm, come to frame 13, and paste, and it will be the opposite. So then what I would do is come back. Now that I have this arm, I can copy, come to frame 13, select the opposite arm, and paste. Then on the spine, because he's basically just rotating back the other way, the Y channel is how you can control that. So if you select there and you just put the opposite value, this is 7, if I put negative, then he turns and he spins the other way, which is good. And then also the Z channel functions the same way. So if you type a negative, then he kind of leans back the other way. Cool. Then in the waist, can perform the same. So this one is negative, so I'll delete that to make it positive. Put a negative in front of that, flips it the other way. And then with the feet, you're basically copy this to the other side. And then you just need to flip a couple values on the feet, which is here on the X, and on the Y, you make it also opposite. So what I'd want to do is select all my controls, go ahead and key that. So now I have the start, the middle, and the end. So this is the beginning of my walk cycle. So these are all of my down poses. So what I want to do now is put in my up poses, which will be at frame 7 and frame 19. So here will be the tallest that my rig ever is. So I can come to frame 7, pick him up, and I like using this reference because you can kind of get an idea. The foot is kind of all the way past a little bit, and he's up on the ball of his foot for the up pose. So he would be past, a little bit past halfway, and using the heel ball control on the IK, you can just rotate it forward by selecting and then middle mouse clicking and then dragging back and forth, and you can get that control to activate. There you go. You want the leg pretty much straight. He's up on the ball of his foot. This I like to put back so he's tilting no more, like he's not reaching forward with his hips anymore. He's also not going to be twisted anymore. He'll be at 0 like that, and then also 0 here. His arms will be pretty neutral. They'll be kind of close to the middle. This one will have been swinging back, so I'll swing the elbow back a little bit. This one will come forward, so this elbow would actually be moving forward. Out a little bit. Cool. And then here, we want to make sure that both the heel ball and the toe point are back at 0. And this control will have been picked up off the ground a little bit so that his foot is coming back forward. And we usually are almost touching the ground a lot with our feet, which is why we trip a lot. So this foot would be pretty close to the ground. Maybe a little bit farther back. Cool. Let's take a look at the reference again. So, oh, okay, it's actually, I'll bring it forward even a little more. So it'll be like that. Cool. Highlight all the controls, hit S, and then what you can do is copy all of these and go ahead and paste them here at 19 so that the height is basically exactly the same, and we can kind of just switch our feet and switch our arms, and we all right, so that's starting to actually look like he's trying to walk, and this is now a 5-frame or a 4-frame walk cycle. So let's go ahead and start splitting our current frames in half. So we have one at the beginning, one in halfway, and one at the end, and then we've split that in half. So now we basically have 2 more frames between each of them to play with to even everything out. So the thing that I'll do at this point is to get the up and down basically nailed down to influence what the rest of our foot movement is going to do. So with our root control selected, I'll bring up my graph editor, select the translate Y, hover my mouse over and press F. So you can see what I currently have is my low points and my high points. So I can highlight my curve and then just start to put in some keyframes that I'll be able to shuffle around to start to get the feeling of what I want. So if I'm here sitting low, I might move up just a little bit the first time and then quite a bit the next time. And similarly, once you reach the top, it comes down just a little bit, and then it'll come down pretty fast. So maybe just a little bit more. Like that. And what you can do is actually with these, you can copy, like highlight from frame 1 to 13, hit Control C, put your time slider at frame 13, and then hit Control V, and it will paste them all like that. So now you have an up and down for your whole walk cycle. And so if you're looking over here, this is very much of an ease and then an ease, because this frame is weighted closer to this one, and this frame is kind of halfway. So it goes a little bit and then a lot, and then here is a little bit and then a lot. So it's easing in and it's easing in again. Cool. So now that we have our up and down, what we can do is start to kind of blend in the rest of the controls around that. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and kind of talk through one side of the foot and then show you the trick that will save you a lot of time in animation, and hopefully it will work out. Okay, so the first thing that I'll do is get the movement from here to here nice and smooth. And so if you look at the Z channel, this rig is set up so that the foot going forward and backwards is on the Z channel. And so right now, this is my first frame, and then here is my last frame. This is looking pretty good for a nice straight line, so that kind of indicates that we're walking at an even speed through the whole walk cycle. So if I highlight my Z channel and start putting in frames, I'll actually want to make sure that these frames are as evenly distributed as they can possibly be. So it looks like a very straight line. So that looks nice and straight. And then working from here, what I want to do is make sure that the foot is not coming off the ground like this by using the heel ball control. So here at frame 7 and at frame 5 and at frame 3, it's all good because they're staying nice and flat. But then at frame 9, what I need to do is start to add in some more of that, but only enough so that the knee bend stays, or that the knee stays pretty straight, because in theory this is still when the person would be standing on this leg. So that is still looking good. And then here is probably the most extreme toe heel ball. So it's still nice and straight, and then right there is when the knee breaks. And you can see it goes forward. And so one nice thing, or actually one thing that I'll do to kind of illustrate the movement or the important movements that are going on here is kind of mask off the other leg so it's not distracting you. So you can watch this knee as it goes through and it's going forward and backwards. It's actually very simple motion, like it's going smoothly through. And then it starts to come back. And if you just put a plane there, sometimes it's nice to help you get the feeling of what's going on. Okay, cool. So now we need to get the foot here all the way back to here, nice and evenly. So we know that this is our next pose. So at this point, make sure that that's keyed. And then in the next frame, both the heel and the toe, I zero out so that I can pick this control up and everything will behave as I expected. So that's on that frame here. And it starts to come back forward. The important thing to keep an eye on is kind of the knee and what's happening there. That's not too much movement, so that's good. That's our next. So we want to kind of split the difference here. And so this is our final pose, and really the pose before would have been our contact. So this would have been when the leg is pretty far out and the heel is just touching the ground. I like that. Boom. Cool. And then this one basically needs to split the difference. And actually I kind of like to bring this out far as well so that it kind of looks like the foot hangs there for a second. It gets there, and then it doesn't really have to move very far to get that one. I might put in a little bit of a toe up. Just kind of reads a little bit better when you play it in. Yeah. Cool. So now here is where the trick comes in. So what I want to do is come back to each of my keyframes and make sure that I'm hitting S on all of them. Totally breaking the rules that I've told you ahead of time, or in the past. The reason being that I want to make sure that I can basically create a little bit of a cycle. So let me delete this plane, don't need it anymore. So this foot has 12 frames of animation, and this foot has, I guess, a few as well, but none of them are really authored. So I'm going to go ahead and delete all the keyframes off of the foot that I didn't just spend a bunch of time on. Then I'll highlight all the frames of this control, right click and say copy. Then I can select this one, go to frame 1 and paste. And what will happen is that I'll be able to get all of the work that I did on the one foot on the other. And all I really need to do is fix a couple of things, and then I'll basically have a mirror version of this one. One of them being I need to have the translate X be opposite. So if I highlight the whole curve by doing a marquee select on the colored part, select the channel, and then up here you have, this is your frames, this is the value. If you have all of your keyframes highlighted and you highlight that field and say times or star, which is times, equal -1, what that does is it multiplies every single one of these by -1, which effectively will flip it over to the other side. So then if I hit enter, you can see my foot is now the right distance on the other side of the x-axis. The other control that you have to do the same thing to is the rotate Y, because you want it to rotate in a mirror fashion. So if you highlight the green part, select the value, say times equal -1, then that foot flips the opposite way. So now you have basically a completely mirrored version of that, which is very, very useful for saving a bunch of work. The final step is basically taking all your keyframes by clicking Translate X at the top and holding Shift and selecting the bottom, and that will bring up all your keyframes. If you highlight all of them and hit Control C and bring your time slider all the way here to the end at frame 25 and hit Control V, that will paste the duplicate of your frames. And the reason that I want to do that is I don't want the feet to be at the same point. So I need more frames so that I can highlight all of them. And now instead of in the value part, what I want to do is double click inside of the frame or the frame number and say -12. And what that will do is it'll shift all my keyframes back 12 frames like that, which is half of 24. So now my feet, I've basically gotten all my foot animation done because I've already done it on the one side. Cool. And so now that I have that, I'll usually come back and clean it up just by deleting all the frames before 1 and deleting all the frames after 25. So now I just have my frames here in the middle. Cool. So what I will do now is kind of maybe do a little bit of a time lapse and clean up some of the arms and start to add in the little final touch for kind of a lean forward.
We might have really messed up not getting a wedding picture like this.
It's pretty ridiculous. That thing is so long.
Isn't that what makes the picture even better though with the dog?
And the dog's like, ah, I'm here.
Because I'd be like, what the fuck's wrong with these people if it was just this picture? If I'm like, oh, this is great.
The dog is not having it. It's not interested, Gene.
They were trying to just take a picture of their stuff.
They were like, hey dog, what's up? Okay, well, finishing up here, I went ahead and added in just a couple little touches in the spine and in the shoulders to indicate a little bit of impact. So that the shape of that kind of looks like these on the rotate Z channel, where you can see here is right when you have made good contact with the ground. So this is when the shoulders would start to slope down even more. And I have that happen for two frames, or I guess 2 keyframes, I should say. So here at frame 3, it goes down some, and then at frame 5, it's down as far as it's going to go. And then it kind of goes back to the neutral position over the next few frames until here at the halfway point. This is when you've touched the ground again, and it just repeats. So actually what I did is I highlighted from frame 1 to 13. I hit copy. I put my time slider at 13. So these weren't there in the past. And then I just pasted. So I had the same impact each time. And that is basically the same process I did for the rotate X channel, which is the one that makes it look like the player is leaning forward. So you can see that. So there's just a little subtle hit that goes through the spine as the foot contacts the ground. Cool. Well, hopefully this has been somewhat helpful. And I know it's a lot, and it's a lot of new controls. But if you have any questions, please let me know.